Here are the things consultants typically complain about. Sales cycles are too long. Nobody's buying. Nobody has money. Nobody has a budget. I have conversations that don't go anywhere. They say they'll get back to me. They don't get back to me. I'm getting ghosted on proposals. They're questioning the fees, hammering me on the fees. And there's this notion that, well, it's just the market. The market sucks. Or clients don't have any money. Or I don't know, what is it about my proposal that's missing? And I think the truth is that the problem behind some of these symptoms runs a lot deeper than people would care to admit.
It's very ominous.
Do I tell them the truth or should I?
You tell
Who's
them
going to be the bearer of bad news today, Carrie?
I always want it to be you. Let me be the good cop for just once.
The truth is most consultants are nice to haves. Oh, it's interesting. You heard that before, right? That's very interesting. No, I like the approach. Makes a lot of sense. We would love to do something like this one day. Not today, but one day. That is a nice to have offer. I can see that this thing is valuable. I can see how it could be valuable in theory, but I don't feel like I need it right now. It is not a must have. I don't feel like I need to work with you. I must work with you in order to make progress on the problems that we're facing and the outcomes we're chasing. It is a nice to have, a luxury, not a must have. Therefore, it gets deferred. Maybe next quarter, maybe next month, and maybe never.
Yeah, or even worse, maybe when things are good, and then we can use this just to make them a little bit better.
Which we would never do that, right? Because when things are good, we don't hire consultants, so we don't spend money we don't need to spend because things are good.
Yeah. And I'll even add to that, the other mistake I think that a lot of consultants make is thinking that the problem that you want to solve for somebody, that you could solve for somebody, is the only problem that they have. Because it's also possible / very probable that they have several big problems in their business, right? And some of them have nothing to do with anything you know anything about. And so you're not just, fighting against helping them understand why it's mission critical for them to solve the problem that you solve. You need them to realize that it's more important than anything else that they can spend their resources on at this moment.
Yeah. And I think the way to think about this is your solution has to move from interesting to necessary. Mm-hmm. And interesting is a prerequisite. Don't get me wrong. It has to be interesting. There's got to be something in there that's intellectually stimulating and that sparks my curiosity and makes me curious and want to learn more. That's table stakes. It's got to be interesting. But interesting does not necessarily mean that I believe it's necessary for us to make forward progress. Mm-hmm. So what we'd like to share with you folks today is 3 bridges, if you will. Three ways to bridge from nice to have to must have. 3 elements that your solution and your positioning should have, your value proposition, if you will, in order to make that transition from nice to have to I must have this now. Sound good? Numero uno. Your solution needs to break their mental model.
I love this. This is like my favorite.
Good
way of framing. Well, and when we were talking before, what kept coming to mind is that your solution needs to be necessary to them. First of all, right? It's probably true that your solution feels necessary to you. You're looking at their problem and you see it as necessary, right? You think that it's critical. But what really needs to happen is that it grabs them, right? And that's why this notion of breaking their mental model is critical, because what it's doing is not just saying, yeah, there's someone who can come along and make things 10% better. There's someone who's going to come along who's going to do things that I've never considered before, right? They're going to try things, or they come I shouldn't just say try things, come with a proven solution that is entirely different than anything that I've considered or that my business has considered. And when you can open up that door for people who have probably been banging their head against it for quite some time, that's when they're really going to grab onto the notion of moving forward, because it's something that's different, right? It's something that appears to be, um, such a brand new perspective that they can truly see it getting them somewhere.
Yeah, I think there's two really important angles here to keep in mind. One is that clients don't buy incremental improvement.
Mhm.
They don't buy 1%, 2%, 3%, 5% improvement, even a 10% improvement. They buy an order of magnitude step change. That's the reason why I would even bother to engage a consultant, pay the fee, engage in the potential disruption, invest the time if there's something really considerable at stake that can be accomplished, not a mere incremental improvement. And therefore, I need to see that you're doing something that's fundamentally different from two things: what we've already tried and what other consultants might do. Right. So your client has a certain mental model around the solutions available to them, things that they've tried, things they've done in the past, strategies they're evaluating right now, consultants they've talked to, and there's certain solution categories in their mind. And you want to come in and essentially create a new category that they never saw before, they never considered before, and therefore represents an opportunity to engage in a more significant program of change than just a 1, 2, 3, 5% improvement. That's the first. Okay. And the reason why this bridges you from nice to have to must have is because, well, if you're going to just improve the things that we're already doing, well, we could probably do that on our own, right? If you're going to do the same things that we've already tried, we could probably just get better at the stuff that we're already doing on our own. That's a nice to have. It'd be nice to have you, but we could probably get that done. But if you're going to do something that we haven't tried before, haven't thought of before, and therefore couldn't even conceptualize on our own, that's different. We might need that. That could be a must have if we believe in it. The second bridge is moving from mere expert to somebody who sees the patterns that we can't see. And so, I think, Carrie, the challenge in the consulting space is everybody wants to be perceived as an expert. And sure, that's fine. You should be perceived as an expert. And at the same time, experts are a dime a dozen. And there are many ways psychologically to prove expertise. And how do you evaluate one expert over another? It becomes very hard. You don't want to be just an expert. You want to be the person that's seen this pattern over and over and over again, and therefore can spot what others are not going to see, can see what other people can't see because you've seen the pattern repeat itself over and over and over again.
Yeah, I would say absolutely that you've seen the pattern repeat itself over and over, but also that you are, so regularly engaged in doing this kind of work that you're also seeing the shifts and the changes that are happening, because problems are becoming more and more complex, right, as time goes by. And if you are the person who is, fully immersed in working in this particular kind of work, what that means is you've seen it happen, and also you see where it's going. And, this is what's going to keep you and therefore your client on the cutting edge and able to come up with the best solution, not just a solution.
Yeah, and understand that that's what clients are looking for, right? When they hire a consultant, they don't want the person that has some expertise in this area. That's, again, table stakes. They want the consultant who lives and breathes this particular problem for organizations like ours, and therefore has access to a wider data set. Why do we love using tools like ChatGPT and Claude and all these AI tools that are out there now? Because they have access to so much data.
Mhm.
That's why they're valuable, right? The sheer amount of data they have access to is what makes them valuable. If they had less data, we wouldn't be using them as frequently as we use them for as many things as we use them for. Consultants are no different, right? The client's asking, likely not in these terms, but they're wondering, how much data do you have access to? If you've never solved this problem before, then, well, we know you're going to try to learn on our dime. which is not particularly interesting. If you sold it a few times, then I know you haven't seen this enough to really be world class at solving the problem. You may still be an expert, but if you've solved it 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 times over the course of your career, you're going to see things that other people can't see. And then now you become a market or a category of one simply on the back of that kind of volume.
Yeah, and I just maybe give some hope to people who maybe haven't solved the problems 50 times or solved the problem 50 times yet, because that's a place you'll get to. But, and I think, repetition, of course, is critical. But I would say that what we're really speaking to is your immersion in the problem, right? The way you're thinking about it all the time, the way you're researching it all the time, the way you're connecting to people who are dealing with it all of the time. And so it's a compilation of all of the efforts that you make to stay really, really engaged.
And clients can tell, right?
Yeah.
Even in the absence of 10, 15, 20 case studies, they can tell if this is something that you live and breathe, like
Yes.
you've dedicated your immediate professional focus to this particular problem in this context, or if it's something you're only doing because I have the problem and therefore you see opportunity. They can tell the difference in the level of insight that you provide. And the third bridge comes back to this notion of I call it the Pareto principle, but you're going to tell me that I'm wrong. How do you say it, Carrie?
Pareto.
Pareto. It's not Pareto, Pareto.
That's how you spell it, but I don't
All
know how
right,
you say
okay. The Pareto
the
principle,
80-20 rule, shall we call
also
it?
known as the
Yeah.
80-20 rule. Right? It's a really interesting phenomenon in consulting proposals that we've observed from coaching and training our clients. Is typically consulting projects are big, right? Big projects, lots of scope, lots of moving pieces. Whatever the price point might be, 30, 40K, 50K, up to 6 figures and 7 figures. There's lots of scope, lots of moving pieces to a typical consulting project. However, every activity within the project is not equal. They don't all deliver the same amount of value. And the challenge with pitching consulting proposals and projects is if you drown your client in too much information, they begin to lose the forest for the trees, and they begin to lose track of, well, what's actually important? What broke my mental model to begin with? What got my attention to begin with? So it's really critical is to put the majority of your focus, 80% of your focus, if you will, on the 20% of the work that really moves the needle. In every consulting project, there's a 20% of that scope that creates 80% of the value, 80% of the transformation. And ideally, that 20% is the stuff that they can't get anywhere else. They can't do on their own. They can't manufacture on their own. They can't get from other consultants. And so this is a big part of bridging from nice to have to must have. Is a big consulting project can be a nice to have, but that 20% focus that really moves the needle, really enables a transformation, that we can't do without. We need that piece. It's part of a larger engagement, obviously, but that's the piece that we really need. That's what motivates us to buy.
Yeah, and this often takes a bit of a shift in your own mental model, right? If we go from the old fashioned view of consulting where it was, let me just get in there and spend as many hours as I can, right? That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is impact. And so recognizing that, using your limited amount of time that you're going to spend with this client to the best possible effect is the thing that's going to be the most effective. It's the thing that's going to get them the most gain, right? It's going to move them forward the fastest. And yes, you're going to work less hours and happily also be able to charge more.